Let's dive right into this explainer and unpack the messy, authentically raw genesis of Lena Dunham's career. Famesick, the coming-of-age arc. Today, we're mapping out her memoir, exploring exactly how a polarizing cultural figure builds her foundation before the world even knows her name. Let's get into it. As you can see here, we'll be using these exact source excerpts to explore her highly complex relationship with her identity, the harsh reality of fame, and the gritty, scrappy New York indie film hustle that launched her. The cover of her memoir sets a really playful, maybe a bit off-balance tone, which honestly perfectly mirrors the journey we're about to take. Figuring out who you are when the world decides it already knows. Okay, check this out. Rose O'Neill, Renata Halpern, Lori Reynolds, Ruth Stein. Now, you might think these are old friends or artistic collaborators, right? Nope. These are actually fake aliases Dunham used at hotels just to avoid being recognized. Imagine reaching a point in your 20s where your given name feels so public, so perverted by media spin, that being Laureate to room service or Renata on the cable bill offers vastly more freedom than just being yourself. She literally writes about how her own name ceased to belong to her. And the origin of that name carries a heavy, heavy irony. So her mother intentionally chose the name Lena because she thought it sounded strong and glamorous, like the perfect name for a movie star or a highly successful lawyer. She didn't even give her a middle name just to keep it super impactful. But to Dunham, as a public figure, it eventually felt like a character she simply didn't write. The name went from a mark of excellence to a signifier of millennial absurdity, and eventually it felt almost like a punchline to her. And the complication of her identity wasn't just happening in the public eye. She writes, "Being in my body didn't feel like towing a wrecked car across town at midnight." While she was dealing with this massive shift in public perception, she was simultaneously battling severe chronic illness that she kept fiercely hidden. For most of a decade, she was basically pretending not to feel how she actually felt. Whether she was on a movie set, on a date, or at some high-fashion party, she was hiding it. There's a really stark, almost cruel contrast between these two defining aspects of our life. Think about it. The public views fame as a condition of privilege, right? Something you actively brought upon yourself, where even the bad parts are supposedly outweighed by the sheer perks. But sickness? Sickness is an isolating, incredibly unglamorous reality. It's a private battle where you're forced to speak in terms of good days, just to make the people around you feel more comfortable. And as she notes, nobody feels sorry for you when you're famous, which makes the physical illness even more deeply isolating. But she did have an anchor. Her father was one of the few people who truly understood this toxic combination. He would literally sit by her hospital bed for days in a suit and sneakers, just reading the New York Times. He witnessed the sheer monotony of her illness and those quick spikes of existential drama, adjusting her pillows, leaving the door ajar. He was the one who could make her feel that this bodily betrayal, happening right in sync with immense public scrutiny, might just be the most important story of her life. But before the crushing weight of fame and illness fully hit, we have to look at the timeline of her early 20s and her scrappy creative genesis. At age 20, she made her first short film. Shortly after, she attended Slam Dance. Then came college graduation and moving into the Red Bucket Collective, and post-grad, filming creative nonfiction. This was just a wildly potent period of incredible hubris and blind ambition. And her true initiation into the indie film scene happened at that Slam Dance festival. She talks about how they kept tripping all the way to the stage, which was this bit of immersive theater that nobody knew whether to laugh or wince at. She was watching the directors of the short film that played right after hers, who actually turned out to be Josh and Benny Safdie, purposefully tripping on their way to the Q&A. And man, she was instantly hooked by their chaotic, ebullient energy. While the rest of the audience gasped, she thought it was the funniest, most brilliant thing she'd ever seen. That exact connection led her straight into the heart of the New York indie scene at the 365 Broadway office, the legendary Red Bucket Collective. Look at this lineup. Josh and Benny Safdie, Ariel Schulman and Henry Joost from Catfish, the Neistat brothers, Greta Gerwig, and Ronald and Mary Bronstein. Dunham rented a tiny 150-square-foot studio just a floor below them. It was an absolute utopia of future indie film titans, all working together in this messy, collaborative boys' club environment that she eagerly ingratiated herself into by, buying them noodles and holding boom mics. So how did they actually make things in that utopia? Well, producing delusional downtown divas on a desktop computer paid off $10 at a time definitely wasn't glamorous. She and her friends would literally crash real art openings just to shoot footage for free, creating at a breakneck pace for an audience of maybe 300 viewers. All of this was happening while she worked these incredibly odd jobs like selling couture-influenced baby clothes. However, a year out of college, the sustainability of this lifestyle inevitably came into question. We hit a critical transition here. How do you escape the dread of stagnation? The thrill of the movie dorm on Broadway was kind of wearing off. She was losing money, still living with her parents, and the deep fear that she wasn't becoming someone new, that she just was, started to really sink in. And honestly, this is a very real wall that almost every single creative person hits at some point. And when you feel stagnant, you cope. And usually, you cope pretty badly. She fell into a completely messy spiral of coping mechanisms. We're talking quitting jobs after barely 5 months, dating an ornithologist on a salmon boat, engaging in a highly toxic fling with an older man who literally had a live-in girlfriend. On top of all that, eating cottage cheese with Splenda and creeping into her dad's closet every morning to weigh herself, fueled by this punishing internal drive to just make something of herself. This intense personal chaos naturally bled right into her living situation. She found herself in a biblical battle with her parents that was really just about her refusal to clean up her messy room. What's funny, and honestly painfully relatable, is that while it felt like an epic clash of good and evil to her at the time, her room was literally just littered with expired makeup and stepped-on mix CDs. The tension in that house was at an absolute boiling point. But believe it or not, that mundane domestic friction actually led to the catalyst for her entire career. Searching for wine in a cabinet one night, again very on brand for a messy 20-something, she stumbled upon a box. Inside were her mother's old journals from when her mother was the exact same age. And with highly questionable logic, she decided to ferret them away under her bed and began reading them in secret, night after night. What she found in those pages was completely mind-blowing to her. The quote reads, "A lot of petty friend problems compounded with a lot of shit from my parents, the deadly liberals. Again, I experienced profound disillusionment." This revealed that at her exact age, her mother wasn't the put-together authority figure she was rebelling against. She was experiencing the exact same profound disillusionment, the exact same petty friend drama, and the exact same fiery anger toward her own parents. It's crazy, right? This massive intergenerational realization was like a lightning bolt. It completely broke her creative stagnation. Seeing that her mother had been just as lost and furious directly inspired Dunham to take action, writing tiny furniture over just a few nights in her father's office. Impatient, hungry, and heartbroken over no one in particular, she sat down and took all of that aimless dread, all of that domestic friction, and channeled it directly into her breakthrough art. Which brings us to a really fascinating takeaway from this explainer. How does accepting our messiest, most unpolished realities ultimately become the blueprint for our greatest breakthroughs? Dunham didn't succeed by pretending to have it all together. She succeeded by putting her literal and figurative uncleaned room onto the screen. So the final thought I'll leave you with today is this. How might confronting your own messy, unpolished realities be the exact fuel you need for your next big breakthrough? Think about that for a bit.